You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
We're back for another edition of Sirius Sports. After a bit of a hiatus, what's going on, Brother Al?
About to get real serious about all these different various sports topics. We're at an interesting point. We just had the national championship game last night in college football. There's been a lot going on in the world, as well as the world of sports, and a bit of overlap. But overall, the games we're watching are interesting, and there's a lot of truth being revealed in them, but they might not be as interesting as the games of life being played out there in this realm.
Yeah, last night was officially the end of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And so it looks like what Washington is moving on to the big whatever they're calling it now.
Right.
The big toe. And yeah, it's just it's really weird. Like I grew up on the West Coast, so I grew up watching. Back in the day, it was called the Pac-8, and I grew up watching Pac-8 sports as a kid. And of course, when there was only 3 channels that were affiliates for local programming, we had 4. We had 2 ABC channels. We had one in San Francisco, one in San Jose. So you had 4 affiliate channels, one of which was a double, and then there were a few UHF channels, and I think one kind of local independent channel off UHF, KNTV. There wasn't a lot of programming, right? So to fill programming time, they would have whatever kind of Pac-8 sport was popular. It was usually basketball or football. So you just didn't have a lot to watch back then. So I watched a lot of very mediocre Stanford teams play back then in basketball, and some with Cal. So along the way, of course, you see all these other Pac-8 teams, like the great UCLA dynastic teams and the USC teams under John McVay. Prior to Pete Carroll, the Trojans were just a warhorse in the 70s, and won a couple of national championships. Were always in the national championship hunt. They were always launching the next Heisman Trophy running back. Started with O.J. Simpson. Actually, I think it started with Mike Garrett, and then O.J. Simpson, and then after O.J., who was Anthony Davis, Ricky Bell, and then eventually Marcus Allen. Right. I mean, so that USC was student body left. That's what they called it because of all the running backs. So it's got a storied history, all up and down the West Coast. And over various periods of time, a number of those colleges would experience levels of success. Like the Don James Huskies won the national championship back in the day. This is back in the 80s, right? And I moved up there in 89, and Don James and the Huskies were huge. I mean, they were almost as big as the Seahawks in terms of popularity. And then you had the whole Nike U period with Chip Kelly at Oregon. There was a period of time where there was this guy named Ralph Miller, who was the coach, I believe, at Oregon. I'm kind of confused, maybe a little bit with Oregon State. But those Ralph Miller coach teams were really great. You had Stanford in terms of baseball with the national program winning championships, USC winning championships in baseball. It was a very kind of storied and rich tradition amongst all those teams. Granted, some teams were generally better than others. In most cases, Oregon State, Washington State, and Cal were almost always bringing up the rear. But it's all gone now, right? It's all gone, and I don't know what this new thing is. I sent you an article, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where Chip Kelly was talking about how what they really should have is a 64-team super conference, and get rid of NIL and just pay the players, right? So the players would get some kind of percentage, and I don't know how they would tier that off, right? Like, what would Michael Penix get versus the third string offensive tackle, right? Like, I don't know how they tiered that thing off, but I'm kind of in favor of what Kelly's talking about, and then you just have a big tournament at the end.
Yeah.
But you basically, what you do is you reestablish local rivalries.
Right.
And then every year you have these teams that would play each other, kind of similar in some ways to the NBA, right?
Yeah.
Like the Warriors would play the Knicks twice a year, once in New York and then once in Golden State. So, and I think what Kelly is pushing is that you would play these two teams on the East Coast one year, and then these teams would play you on the West Coast the next year. And there would be kind of a rotating schedule of those teams, right? Like, eventually you'd hit all of them.
Yeah.
But that's what he's talking about. And
Yeah,
then
I think that's interesting and also somewhat inevitable, because what we're seeing right now is sort of the growing pains of a professional league. And I think, the whole collegiate athlete thing, at least for football, is slowly fading away. And like what we see, in my view, with the destruction of the Pac-12, this great, they were the best conference in college football this year, arguably, right? And now
it's
it's
ironic.
over.
I mean, they had a number of teams vying for
Right.
the 14 playoff.
Absolutely. So they have that's being dismantled, and it's no longer, and it's being sort of replaced by essentially a professional league. And I think that the death of the Pac-12 is sort of symbolic of what we're seeing on the macro level with football. And I think what we're seeing is really the inflation of football. We're seeing year-round football taking place now because we have two new professional leagues. It's not just the college football that's essentially professional now. It's also the UFL that'll be launching in the spring. So we're going to have football fucking year round. You know what I mean? Spring football for the NCAA is just around the corner. We're in the middle of the transfer portal right now, where a lot of these bowl games absolutely sucked because the teams are essentially way different from the teams we saw during the season. Because, guys, as soon as that transfer portal opens up, you got starting quarterbacks from Ohio State, starting quarterbacks from fucking Oklahoma.
What about
transferring
Florida?
out? Guys who have great gigs, making great money, and leaving because they want better opportunities. And I came to a big conclusion this week because I've been watching the transfer portal and how the culture of college football has changed to a more professional league, right? What the transfer portal does, it actually really hurts rivalry. Like, you're the starting quarterback at Ohio State. I forget the kid's name. Mick something. He's a great player. He's transferring to Syracuse. It's got to be something like a girl has got to be behind that. You know what I mean? And then at Oklahoma, you had their starting quarterback, this kid, Dylan Gabriel, I believe his name is. 5'10", fucking laser fast Hawaiian kid. Unbelievable. Awesome player. Transferring to Oregon. So, I see this parallel where rivalry gets destroyed when guys are switching teams. That's how rivalry gets dismantled, right? And it kind of reminds me of the free agency we saw in the NBA and what we see in the NBA nowadays, right? Guys are switching teams all the time, right? All the guys know each other in the NBA. It's like a big fraternity. And so what do we have after the games in the NBA? We have guys hugging each other. There's a hugging epidemic.
They exchange jerseys.
They dude, okay. Not only do they hug in the NBA, I think we're this close from the European fucking cheek kiss. Okay. That's how bad it's getting. There's an absolute affection epidemic in the NBA. It's unwatchable in my view. So yeah, it's just the shift in professionalism.
Here's what I think. I think, to be fair to the NBA, I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here. These guys have been playing AAU ball against each other all their lives.
True.
So they've had relationships with these dudes for a long time, right? And I would say, for the most part, they're friendly. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
they're all friends.
The whole AAU environment changed basketball completely, because prior to the AAU, you had a lot of guys who were playing in environments that were, how should I say this, a little more edgy and dangerous, right? Like they would play on courts in the inner cities, and things got rough in those places. And those places just don't really exist anymore, because those kids are scooped up and brought into the AAU atmosphere, where everything is pretty much catered for them, right? So they have this, all of them do, right? They all have this sense of, at times, slight entitlement, because they switch teams too. Like, well, if I'm not getting, floor time on this team, I'll go to this team. I'll go play in this AAU team. So all the player movement stuff is a byproduct of what happens in the AAU. And then all the friendliness comes with these guys who played against each other for at least 10 years, right? So they have bonds with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, I think that in a lot of ways, and look, we're probably much older school in this way, but when I played sports, when you were, between the lines, like for however long you played, you were not anybody's friend except the guys on your own team,
Mm-hmm.
right? They were not your friends. At the end of the game, you could shake whatever, but during that time, it was all very intense and competitive. And I'm not saying that that's completely gone, but clearly, to your point, there's a different model in play.
Yeah. So just to get back to the national championship game we saw last night, a few things I'd like to address. First,
before we go there, hold on. Before we go
Yep.
there, Seeger brings up a really great point.
Okay.
And Seeger's from England. And he says, similar to how removing the cap on a number of foreign players destroyed English soccer. So
can you expand on that a little bit? Because a cap is a game you've played, correct?
No, a cap is a limit, right?
Okay, how much you can
limit
spend?
to how many. So I don't know how many. Maybe Seeger could tell us, but
like a salary cap.
No. It's like in Japan, I think you can only have 3 American players on your team in Japan. So there's a cap on foreign players. That's what happened. It was 3 non-UK. So Seeger says it was 3 non-UK players. So
they got rid of that.
Yeah. So I guess in order to make sure all the new fans from all the new countries are satisfied, they lift the cap. And I don't know how many players there are now.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I don't follow then the 3 non-U then 0 limit. Oh, look at that. Look at this. Now there's 0 limit.
Oh, wow. So I see that as an attack on nationalism. As an attack on national sovereignty.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I remember watching some of those World Cup teams from England in the early 2000s and just remarking to myself, this is a decidedly English bunch.
Right.
Right. Like, and now, everything's changed.
Oh, yeah. You look at the team from France, none of those guys are French. I'm not going to watch that.
Right. Paul Mbappe. That's the only guy I know is Paul Mbappe.
Right.
From Paris Saint-Germain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they've kind of gamed the system, and clearly they've turned soccer into less of a national product, into an international game, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I wasn't aware of that. But this is a really, really interesting thought I had about the national championship game. All right. So as we've talked about before, Michigan cheated during the season. They cheated. They recorded another team's play calls, and who knows what they did with that. Who knows how much of an advantage it gave them. Who knows if they would be national champions if they did do that, if they didn't do that. They basically admitted to it, and the head coach, Harbaugh, was suspended for a time period. Okay, so long story short, they cheated. Okay, so I wonder, okay, what sort of psychological impact does that have on the society at large, right? Because it's very similar to the New England Patriots, who also cheated all the fucking time. And I'm saying that as a guy in New England. Hell yeah, they cheated. It's obvious.
Well, let's ask the bigger question: who isn't cheating? Right. I think they're all cheating to some degree.
Exactly. But it's kind of interesting that people know Michigan cheated to an extent, and they're the champions. And it's kind of like the place Michigan is, and it's kind of like, yeah, we cheated and we still won. So what? It sort of puts the spectator sort of in a paralyzed paralyzed theater seat where they're like, okay, we know those guys cheated and they're getting away with it. Shit. And I think that sort of parallel to other things in society,
I think a lot of that is Jim Harbaugh's chart as well.
Okay.
Because Jim Harbaugh is a Virgo rising, and he has Uranus and he has Pluto in his first house. And he courts that kind of confrontational energy, especially with Uranus, right? Like he's a very Uranian kind of character. At times he's unpredictable. At times he'll have like weird shit happen, like the cheating scandal. And Harbaugh's one of those guys with Pluto. You either love him or you hate him, right? There's no middle ground with Harbaugh. And he's a Capricorn. He's a really early Capricorn. He's born on, I think, either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. So, he's very ambitious as well. So I think part of that is Harbaugh's chart. I remember one time when the 49ers were playing the Lions and he got into almost like a fist fight with Jim Schwartz, who was coaching the Lions at the time. I think the 49ers won that game. And, two highly competitive, testosterone-driven kind of alpha male guys were going at it. But that's who Harbaugh is. And he has a very short shelf life. I think he's been at Michigan now for 7 years. And that's a quarter of a Saturn cycle. I think he's on the run. I think he's going to leave. He's won the championship. He's won the title. He could get anything he wants now from the school if he wanted to. But there's going to be his stock will never be higher in the National Football League than it is now. And there's at least 3 teams that would back up the Brinks truck for him right now. And I think he's going to go.
Well, yeah, it's quite possible, but I just think it's interesting that him and his brother are likely to be in championship games this year. Jim already did it. Now his brother, the head coach of the Ravens, is looking like a very likely AFC champion.
John Harbaugh is a hell of a coach, man. He's great.
Right.
He's great. And I talked about the time where they played against each other in the Super Bowl in New Orleans, and how that was a projection of the coming Civil War, right? And it was Sport Magazine or Sports Illustrated, I forget which one, at the beginning of the season had brother versus brother, on one of the copies of their magazine, and so there was that. And then at the beginning of the season, on I think Inside the NFL or one of these shows, showed the Harbaugh brothers plus their father, and they went to a Civil War reenactment. Like they're totally into the Civil War. They're Civil War freaks. So that was before the season. There are the Harbaugh brothers watching Civil War reenactment. Then it's brother versus brother. And then the game happens in New Orleans, where there was, of course, battle for the Civil War. They burned New Orleans down. And the whole thing to me just seemed like staged Freemasonic theater.
Okay.
Right. The whole thing seemed like staged Freemasonic theater. And I know the Harbaugh family are hardcore Catholics. I think Jim's got some weird thing going on. Like, I would not be surprised if he belonged to some kind of lodge or society, whether it's inside the Catholic Church or something else. Like, he just feels like a guy that's connected. He used to call his players on the San Francisco 49ers mighty men. And that's a term from the Bible, right? Mighty men. So I think his stock has never been higher. He's going to leave. Did he cheat? Did they enable the cheating? Is that a reflection of society?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, I just think that a rigger's mindset is a winner's mindset. And to be talking about winning, you got to be talking about rigging to some degree, potentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Joshua brings up an interesting point here. He says, people still watching fake football and satanic halftimes. I've stopped watching the halftime shows.
Yeah, that's what's funny about this show, Joshua. This is the only sports show where the two guys don't actively watch sports. Like,
Yeah.
I watch college football. I'm a sucker for it. I love it. Big time college football. I'm into it. I like it. It's fun. I don't watch the NFL or the NBA, but I do check out the highlights, and I have a general idea of what's going on in the league just from social media, and that's all I need. I just need the highlights. So it's just funny that this show, we don't really watch sports like actively. You know what I mean? I think that's so funny.
Yeah, it is funny. And so I got my mother YouTube TV so she can watch, like, I don't have, like Spectrum cable or anything like that.
Right.
So I did watch the Washington versus UT game because UT, of course, being in proximity to where I live, I wanted to see that game.
Yeah.
And then I knew we were going to talk about last night's game tonight.
Right.
So I sat through it, and honestly, I didn't really enjoy the game.
Yeah, I had fun watching UT this year, man. They're a very talented group. I enjoy watching them.
I'm talking about last night's game. I didn't really enjoy.
Oh, okay, last night's game. Okay, last night's game, it was fun. It was interesting. I was in and out. The interesting thing to me is the fact that Michigan is a running football team, and it was almost like a blast from the past. And I personally don't believe the running back position is going anywhere. I think that the running back position is a career that's short-lived. If you last more than a decade, and I'm talking college and the pros, if you last more than a decade, 6 years of college nowadays, and if you last 4 years in the pros, that's a fucking hell of a career. But I don't think the position itself is going anywhere. I just think that it's a short-lived, high impact lifestyle. And I don't think guys will last that long at that position. I think we'll see more running backs by committees where it's like 2 or 3 guys are getting the ball. Texas, you watch that game.
Yeah, but still, that doesn't improve their earning potential in the program.
Yeah, it's going to be a short-lived thing. I mean, it's not going to be. They're not going to. The only way, because they're pissed. They're pissed. Running backs in the NFL are pissed because they're not getting paid like the quarterbacks, like the wide receivers, like the cornerbacks, because they don't have the longevity. Okay. And it's just not a great investment for an organization to pay a guy that they know is not going to last that long. He's like a race car, literally like a race car. It's going to get crashed. It's going to get banged up. That's just how it goes, right? The only way they could fight against that is if running backs got together and, started a running backs union. And they you know what I'm saying? I swear to God, that's the only way they could do it. And the only way they could do it from there is they could, they could say, hey, we know our careers are going to be short-lived. We understand the reality of this position. Our first contract's got to be fucking awesome.
Maybe they could have O.J. Simpson be their union leader.
That would be awesome. Or Reggie Bush. I think if these guys can put their heads together, that's the solution they could potentially come up with. Somebody like Reggie Bush would be perfect if he could, if they got together and if they talked and if they said, hey,
I just think the national, it's been known, right? There's been strikes in the NFL before, and guys have, crossed the line.
Mm-hmm.
They crossed. There was a strike. When was it? 1982 strike shortened season, and there were players that crossed the line, and so it's been proven that players will cross the line. So you could have every theoretical professional running back say, "Well, I'm not going to play unless we get more money." I guarantee you'll get 100 other guys that'll show up and say, "I'll take your job."
Absolutely. Totally.
Which doesn't bode well for their case.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, we talked about this before when we got into the spread offense and the Mike Leach stuff and the was it the red gun or whatever. We got into that, and the running back in that offense is clearly an ancillary part of that offense. It is not a featured position.
But it's a pivotal position.
Well, it's pivotal only in the sense that you need to keep the other side honest by running the ball every now and then. Right. And again, like just how we talked about the evolution of players and how in this system, you don't need somebody who can understand a massively thick playbook with play calls that have 15 characters that are a part of them, right? All you need are some dudes on the sideline with sandwich boards and then changing the symbols and then the little wrist thing, right? So you don't need somebody who has the ability to master an entire playbook. And that changes the dynamic of who a quarterback can be. Now, all of a sudden, you're more willing to take somebody who is more of an athlete and can run the ball and pass the ball. And we looked at the passing trees for that offense, and they're very basic. They're like 4 routes, and then there are variations on those 4 routes. So when that happened, that changed the quarterback position. So you had guys who might be like, I don't know, maybe 6'1", 200 pounds, who could have played running back. Now they're playing quarterback because they can throw a little bit, right? Same thing with wide receivers. If there are wide receivers that can play a little quarterback, or you've got running backs who seem to be a bit tall for the position. Let's say they're 6'2", right? Then they'll go out and they'll play wide receiver instead. I mean, so the game has changed, right? The cosmetics of the game have changed.
Right. But it's, when you look at a team like Michigan, who is a running football team, they're a run first. They run a lot, as a football team. I think that teams are going to copy it because they won the national championship with that almost opposite of the, the passing rate style, so it'll be interesting to see if anybody tries to adopt that,
I've not followed the Michigan Wolverines all year, right? Just kind of, again, ancillary. Yeah. But from what I was able to garner from the game last night, that their offense was predicated on all these different looks, right? Like they could bring in different formations, they could bring in a different quarterback. Yeah. They were just throwing everything at the other team so that the other team could be off balance. And I think the running game was part of it, but I don't think it was the main staple of it, even though their guy got over 1,000 yards.
Their season, that was the main staple. Yeah, they do a lot of different looks, but it's like they're a running football team, which I think is interesting because it is counter to the dominant narrative of a lot of these guys, a lot of these teams banging fucking shotgun almost every play. You know what I mean? A lot. There's a lot of that. So
do you think Blake Corum could make it in the NFL as a running back?
I think he'll have a great 2 or 3 years.
Because he's not real big.
I think that's it. I think that's a good running back career is 2 to 3 years as a role player. I think that's a successful NFL running back career. He's a beast. He's a great player, but I just think the days of a guy being a prominent running back in the NFL for 5 to 6 years, I think that's exceptional nowadays. I don't think we'll see the decades-long careers that we've seen in the past. I just think things are way, way different now. So to answer your question, I think Blake will be successful for 2 to 3 years, and that'll be it. Then we'll see him in the commentator booth, and I think that's a successful career. So I think Rob's cut out. He was a little freeze frame. So I think what he's doing now is rebooting his computer. But what we're probably going to talk about next, pertaining to the national championship game that we watched last night, are the 2 quarterbacks. The first being Michael Penix Jr. from Washington, and the other being J.J. McCarthy from Michigan. 2 very different guys, 2 very different careers. Michael Penix, he's had 3 or 4 different injuries. He's played college football for at least 5 or 6 years easily, right? It could even be 7. But it's interesting because he's sort of a career. Okay, Rob's back. Rob is back in his house. What's up, Rob? How you doing, man?
So I just had to become unfrozen in time.
Yeah. Oh wow! Okay, I think you're back now. There's a little fuzziness, but now you're back.
Yeah, a little Max Headroomy. I mean, I think it was an interesting sort of clash in styles. I did watch Washington against UT, and I really thought that Michael Penix was very impressive.
Oh my God. Game. I'd say this, man, right now, especially during that UT game, he's better than half. half the fucking guys in the NFL right now. Like, he's really fucking good. But here's the thing. How old is Michael Penix Jr. and how long has he been playing college football?
I think this is what his 5th or 6th season, something like that.
Yeah, easily. I'm going to look up his age right now, but he's got to be 24.
I know he had at least 2 years at Indiana.
Exactly.
Seeger says the same thing happened with the sweeper position in soccer, which was usually the captain and the smartest player who was at the back of the formation. Sweeper doesn't even exist anymore. Wasn't Franz Beckenbauer the sweeper? Like, wasn't he a sweeper, Seeger, or Johan Cruyff? That was the sexy position in soccer. If you were the sweeper, like you were the dude. Tondar, who I think is from Michigan, said Michigan had a collection of beefy upperclassmen. Yeah, that defensive line in Michigan was no bullshit.
Yeah,
right?
I like Vaughn.
They were big.
That kid Vaughn is a pro.
And and I think Penix did have broken ribs at the end. I would
wow.
I'd agree with that. But he was so impressive against UT. He could do anything he wanted.
Yeah.
During that game. He's a Taurus. So Michael Penix is a Taurus. He's not built like a Taurus. He's not real stout, right? Yeah. He's a little more lithe. But he's got a lot of physical attributes. He can sling the ball. He can run the ball. I think his biggest issue is going to be able to just stay healthy at the next level.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. I mean, that game was fun to watch, and I was very, very impressed with Washington when they beat UT during that particular game. I thought UT was hungover. They were just like a step behind, a step slow, just not that enthusiastic. A few guys at the wide receiver position were not living up to their regular season play. And I felt like maybe, since they were in New Orleans, maybe they went out the night before or something, because they were just weren't up to speed in my view.
So I when I used to be in the music business, and I knew this guy who had a label, music label, and before he had the label, he had a club in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And this was when the Saints were perennially terrible. And he said the Saints players would always show up at his club on Saturday night. And they wouldn't leave till like 3 or 4 in the morning.
Right.
Right. Sometimes later. No wonder they stunk.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
They were just out all the time, just getting shit-faced.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that happens a lot when teams play in Miami. Like, there are teams that just can't play in Miami. They just suck. Like the New England Patriots.
There's too much temptation.
Right. It's like, let's just go out for a little bit. Oh, well, whatever. We don't have to be up till like 12. We'll be fine.
I guess for a while you can make the correlation that's why Green Bay has been successful for such a long period of time.
Right.
Right. There's nothing to do there.
Right.
Except play football.
Also, whenever the New York Knicks get a big time player, they go to New York and there's just too much to do. The fucking bars are open till 4 a.m.
So, New York has ruined a lot of athletes for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So let's put this picture up here. Everyone had their worst game against Michigan. Harbaugh created the perfect chaos machine. Yeah, so that gets back. It's an interesting quote, the perfect chaos machine. He's got Uranus in the first house. And so Jim Harbaugh he coached the 49ers for 5 years, I think. He came in 2011, and I think he left in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, 2016, right around there. And the longer he stayed there, the more chaos erupted around the team, right? And so he has a very short shelf life. So this is a great quote from Tondar, because what he did is and you can even see some of the chaos that they had this season with him, mm-hmm. right? There was the preseason self-imposed suspension and then the in-season suspension. But this is a great quote because he was able to turn it into like a system or formula for the team, right? So the team was able to channel Harbaugh's chaos. And that is, I think, what coaching does, right? Teams take on the persona of the coaches. So if they have all these different looks and these organized chaos, that's Harbaugh at the peak of his powers.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. Order out. What is it called? Order out of chaos or something like that is the saying.
Gordo Ab Chow. Yeah.
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 Interesting.
So, but I think he's leaving. I think he's gone. And I think he's going to coach the Las Vegas Raiders.
Wow.
And that's because he has a relationship with Mark Davis. And that's where Jim Harbaugh got his coaching start as a quality control assistant for Al Davis with the Raiders.
You would think, but do you think that an institution like the University of Michigan can economically compete with an NFL franchise?
To a point.
Okay.
To a point. I
So
mean,
in a bidding war, the NFL is going to win. An NFL team is going to win.
It depends on who the owner is.
Okay.
Now, granted, Mark Davis doesn't have deep pockets, but he gave John Gruden one of the richest and stupidest contracts ever.
And then what happened with Gruden, man? He wrote some emails or something. I love John Gruden.
So what happened with Gruden is that they were trying to find dirt on Daniel Snyder, we'll keep it in the astrological realm. Daniel Snyder is a Sagittarius, and nobody's going to tell him what to do, right? Whatever you think of Daniel Snyder, he was also a conservative. He was a conservative guy. No, they forced him out.
He was the owner of the Raiders?
He was the owner of the Redskins.
Okay.
So they were trying to get dirt on Daniel Snyder.
Yeah.
We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, how they have these orchestrated coups
to
get owners off their teams.
Yeah.
And this was an orchestrated coup. They went through, I think, something like 40,000 emails that they were able to obtain from the Redskins at the time. And there were a series of emails between John Gruden and Bruce Allen. And Bruce Allen was the son of George Allen, who, of course, was a famous coach. I think Bruce Allen might have been a congressman or a senator at one point, but he was with the organization for a while, and John Gruden knew him pretty well. Of course, John's brother, Jay, was the head coach for the Redskins for a while.
Yeah.
And he sent some emails regarding this guy named DeMaurice Smith, who is the players rep. And he talked about how stupid he was. And then he talked about his big watermelon lips.
That's funny.
Well, it's what got him fired.
That's insane. Right? Yeah.
That email got him fired.
That's crazy.
Right? And then, of course, since there's guilt by association, it trickled over to Daniel Snyder. Now, John Gruden has a massive lawsuit against the NFL. And he's locked and loaded and ready to go. And the NFL I think they want to settle with Gruden. He doesn't want to settle because they fucked his career up. Yeah. Right. Like theoretically, there was a private email between him and Bruce Allen.
Right.
And is that a fireable offense?
Hell no. That's just funny. It's probably true.
Jack Strom comes in. Didn't Jack Del Rio get fired for some racist comment? Not really, but Jack Del Rio had to make an apology at some point.
What did he do? What did he say?
I think he was an All Lives Matter guy.
Oh, wow. How offensive. How terrible. Fire him right away. Insane.
No, Jack got fired because ultimately his defenses weren't that. I like Jack Del Rio. He's the guy who played and he was a big-time player at USC.
Yeah, I like him because he used to wear suits on the sidelines, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah, he was wearing the suit the same time that Mike Nolan was wearing the suit. And at least one of them could coach. Mike Nolan was a terrible fucking coach. He's a Pisces. Mike's a Pisces. Okay. Bad news.
Pisces can't coach?
No, that's not true. Mike McDaniel's a Pisces, and I think he's a very good coach. Andy Reid's a Pisces. He's a good coach. But with Andy Reid, there's like a sloppy kind of backstory with him, right? And the shit with his kids. The one kid who was the drug dealer, the performance-enhancing drug dealer for the Eagles as the strength coach.
That's interesting, man. Because something similar happened with a Red Sox announcer, Jerry Remy, right? And his son was the steroid guy for the Red Sox. He was selling them.
Did he die? Did he die?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Steroids are heavy duty, man. Like, if you're going to use them, you got to know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You need assistance. I never was interested in taking steroids, but I knew people who did, and never appealed to me in any way, shape, or form. Just too much. Why? You know what I mean? You could really fuck yourself up, and for what? To shave a half second off your 40?
Well, I think a lot of it. I've seen documentaries on high school players who've done steroids in order to compete and get a scholarship or get a contract. And I think that the competition level is real, right? And so they'll take that step or they'll cross that line, and often with really, deleterious effects on their body. So I think it's not just about, it's not like you're competing with other people at the same level. What you're trying to do is you're trying to take your ability, your athletic ability, and amplify it so you can compete with the level above you, right? That's how they work. There was this guy named Tony Mandarich who was the first round. I think he might have played for Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. Tony Mandarich was huge. I mean, this guy was fucking enormous. And he was the first pick taken in the NFL draft. I think he was taken by, was it the Green Bay Packers. And one of the things that they talked about with Tony Mandarich was how small his penis was, right? So was there a direct correlation between being huge and the size of your junk, right? Does your junk shrink because you're putting all these, these fake hormones in your body? I don't know the answer to that. But Tony Mandarich never lived up to his potential. And I think, how do you live something like that down? That's got to be really, yeah. So Astro Motion said steroid make your pee-pee even smaller. That's what I'm talking about. Small Peeny Mandarich went to Michigan.
Well, the idea, right, is that an external substance is now producing testosterone. So your testicles say, hey, I don't need to produce testosterone anymore. Something else is doing it. And then they shrink because the testosterone is, it's way higher than it needs to be. So the testicles go, hey, this guy's good with T.
So Tondar put this up there. He said, I can't stand when the coaches or baseball manager wears the team uniform or gear like a child. It's interesting watching the coaches in the NBA now. They're all wearing the same fucking thing, right? There's a uniformity to what they're wearing. They all wear a sweatshirt or not a hoodie, but whatchamacallit, a zip up, and then sweatpants. They all look the same.
Yeah.
Baseball's weird because they all dress like players.
Right.
I don't know. It would, would it matter if they didn't? Not to me. But the basketball thing, if you go back in time and look at some of the basketball coaches from the 1970s,
like Pat Riley, for example, Coach K,
these guys fucking styled, man. They fucking
they look
styled.
great. They look great in suits.
Yeah, and you like the 70s suits were off the fucking chain.
Yeah.
You had Al Attles coaching for the Warriors, and he's kind of wearing his his
Now they got
suit with his white collar.
The NBA coaches look like me. They got that zip down kind of sweater.
Exactly. It's right.
This is not the attire of a professional basketball coach. You should be wearing fucking suits.
I'm going to bring Seeger back in here because he has a comment about steroids, which I think is very true and is one of the upsides to steroids. Roids aid recovery time, injury comeback insanely. Vast amount of UFC fighters are on the sauce. They're in the NFL. Guys are still using steroids in the NFL. Right? It's not like the steroid issue went away. If you are colliding with people at high speed all the time, your body is going to take a beating. So, and they play the following Sunday, right? So these guys are on roids.
Yep.
They're totally on roids. But getting back, I brought that up because I brought this up from Seegard, because soccer coaches, I think maybe the head manager wears a suit But
Yeah.
it feels to me like these NBA coaches now look like fucking soccer coaches, and they all dress the same. It's like, to me, it's like totally socialist. It's like they all just wear the same fucking Nike sponsored uniform, right? And it's just I don't know, not very inspiring.
Right. This is the only sports show where it's like we actively hate on sports culture, but like rightfully so. Rightfully so, man. You know what I mean?
So I wanted to bring this. You and I were talking about JJ McCarthy,
Yes.
and again, I watched the game enough to see this little feature on JJ McCarthy, in-game feature on him, and in a weird way, I got to say, I kind of like it.
I like JJ overall, but I think that the audience needs to know with JJ McCarthy, the quarterback for the University of Michigan, there's this overall narrative. Is this a video? Okay, yeah. There's this narrative. Okay, he was depressed in high school. Okay, and now he learns all these mindset techniques. He meditates. He's getting therapy mid-game. He's with his therapist mid-game on the sidelines. There's a picture of that as well.
Is it like a team therapist or something? Doesn't he like? Is he like the team shrink on the sidelines?
I don't know if it's the team shrink or his personal shrink. I don't know. That's an interesting question. But
That's a weird picture.
Funny.
It looks like he has dragon wings, doesn't it? It's like it looks kind of a cultish.
That's kind of a cool photo. You know what I mean? But I mean, so the main thing with JJ McCarthy is he's pushing the mental health thing. And I'm not saying that mental health isn't valid. It's completely valid. My issue with the mental health thing that's kind of pushed widely in society, it sort of separates the mental from the spiritual to the physical, when in reality, those things are all sort of intertwined. You could also intertwine,
I agree.
Right? Your personal relationships, your tribal health. What is the health of your, external tribe? That matters. Your literal environment, your, the actual environment, the weather, all these different factors. So my personal issue with the mental health thing that's being pushed everywhere, right, is I think it's sort of reflective of a pharmaceutical agenda, perhaps, or perhaps reflective of a, mental health industrial complex, a giant industry. Now that I do believe JJ McCarthy here, for the remainder of his time in the spotlight, will be a poster child for being a national champion, being a quarterback, being a charismatic kid, being well-spoken. He is now going to become the poster child for mental health in America, similar to what we saw, somewhat similar. Michael Phelps, he wins a bunch of gold medals, starts talking about mental health. Simone Biles didn't win any gold medals.
Well, it's weird with Phelps because everything is like kind of like after the fact.
Right.
Like, yeah, you got up at 4 a.m. every fucking day.
Yeah.
To go, do your laps and out swim everybody.
Yeah.
And look, I think competing at a high level has a tremendous amount of stress that goes along with it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Like we can't underplay that.
Right.
And so for a lot of these people, they get into it, right? And they just become robotic. And then at a certain point, maybe after the fact, they look back on their life and they'll say, well, geez, that's all I did. And the rest of my life was stunted because of it. Well, that's what the fuck happens when you want to get good at something, right? You just do that one thing over and over and over and over again until you're the best at it.
Right.
Right. They asked, what's her name?
Simone.
Not Anna Kournikova, the other one, the Russian tennis player, the one that won Wimbledon. I forget her name.
I'll look it up.
But they asked her, like, don't you feel like you sacrificed your childhood by practicing and playing tennis all the time? And she said, no, absolutely not. Look what it got me. Right? Like she had the right answer, It's like, yeah. Now, JJ McCarthy, I looked up his astrological sign. He's an Aquarian, right? And this is what an Aquarian quarterback would do. Like they would do something like this. But the thing that I thought was funny was the halftime reporter said that he had taken his shoes off and put them, put his soles on the ground. in order to ground himself, which is what people do, right? It's kind of considered like a biohack. You take your shoes off, you put your feet on the ground, and then you connect with the current of the earth, right? And I thought to myself, yeah, but that's AstroTurf. What is he really connecting with here? Is he going a couple layers deep, right? And I thought, and I get it. I totally get it. I think this is who this guy is. This is who he is. This is the portrait of an Aquarian quarterback.
Oh, here we go. I'm
got
back.
you back.
Yeah, I do think it is who he is, but I do think at the same time he will be used. You know what I mean? And I think he'll be okay with that. Something like grounding, I think it's totally valid. I barefoot sprint all the time. But when you do it on AstroTurf, what's going on here, JJ? You know, is it the same? Probably not, but I get it. I get it, pal. You know, I'm not a
You have
hater.
to go a few layers deeper, right? You know,
Mhm.
yeah. To get
I'm not a
to it.
hater. I'm not a JJ hater by any means. I just think that you know, that just the mental health thing, it doesn't talk about a lot of other factors that are really important for just human beings.
Seared always brings the gravy. 100%, Al. The discussion of men's depression is just a way of mainlining them into the antidepressants market. Totally, 100%.
Dude, the most effective marketing campaign I've ever seen was the whole chemical imbalance marketing thing where it says, you know, you have a chemical imbalance, you don't have any control over it. But in reality, you have a lot of control over a lot of different things. And I'm for people empowering themselves, right? And I think that's important. And yeah, and another thing that we could talk about, because we're going to talk about Mr. Draymond Green, the junkyard dog fool that he is, right? But he's somebody who says, hey guys, I went to therapy, I'm good now. You know what I mean? You know, JJ McCarthy, he's going to be a therapy advocate. Hey guys, go to therapy. Is that really good for men? Is it really to sit down, not do anything constructive, not do any manual labor that might be a lot better for you, get some exercise, get some weights going, work on your physical health. That might be awesome for you. Don't do that. Talk to a stranger on the couch. That's therapy. You need that. I'm not buying it.
Well,
So
I think there's an interesting line between therapy and like a sports enhancement performance coach, right? And so there are people who really understand things like peak experience and how to get to peak experience.
okay.
There was this guy named Jack Schwartz who was a very interesting kind of psychic and mystic and was sort of popular in the 70s and the 80s. And that was his field, right? To get people so that they could be at a realm of peak experience faster. So there are all these tricks in order to do that, body-mind tricks, right? And that's kind of outside the realm of therapy in some ways, right? That is like tools and technology to enhance your performance. But it does go into the psyche, and it is part of the body-mind experience. So I think that there are kind of two schools of thought around this, right? There's this school that allows you to so-called manage your so-called reality, right? Which would be the mental health world. And then on the other hand, you have these guys or these people who are really, really good at being able to physically and mentally and psychologically enhance what's called peak states. So, and I think that those people are very interesting, right? Like, I always forget this guy's name, but it'll come to me. You guys started so fast this morning. Any tips? Got any tips, Al? You got any betting tips?
Yeah, I do. But I didn't have a great year betting. I had a few really good weeks, but my big pick for college football was Texas. I was wrong about that. Big pick for the NFL, the Jets. Super wrong. But no, I have a few bets in play right now. I have a Michigan Dolphins parlay. I hit one leg with Michigan. We'll see what's going on. I call that my Sirius Sports parlay because I picked Michigan to win the college football championship in a parlay with Miami from our friend Mark, who predicted the Miami Dolphins wonderfully so far for the most part, but also in play.
I think they're in trouble.
Dude, it's crazy. I think that, your pick the purple red color combo pick is looking fucking fantastic.
I think it's
Also-
coming. I think it's coming. I think it's going to be the Ravens, Niners.
Yeah.
I think the Niners are going to win.
Okay.
Brock
Okay.
Purdy's going to be the MVP, and it will be the peak of the NFL. And
Okay,
then,
and then, hey,
everything
that's
after
something-
that is on the other side of the mountain.
Okay, I'm probably going to take that bet. I like it because I think that the Ravens and the Niners are on a fucking collision course. It looks to me. And you predicted that a long time ago. I didn't think it would be that simple. Like they show us with the colors what's going to happen.
They always show us.
Right.
They always show us. Yeah. And it would be
Right.
kind of a repeat of the 2012 Super Bowl, 2012 with the Ravens and the Niners in New Orleans. And this one's in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
I have another version of Sin City. Seeger says the reliving childhood trauma, PTSD, implanting stuff that is so brutally anti-masculine. That's true, right? Like going back into the historical memory of one's life and having to relive trauma again and again and again to try to somehow make a friend of your trauma. And that is pretty anti-masculine, actually.
Wembanyama had a great quote about Las Vegas, didn't he?
Yeah, he said it was dystopic.
Yeah, I thought that was funny.
love
He's totally
Wembanyama.
genuine. And
I
he's
love
right.
him.
I have like no desire to go to Las Vegas, really.
Back in the old days, it was interesting. Not so much anymore. A cognitive distance actually asked us, laugh aloud. I meant like I'm not eating for a few days type of fast. Yeah, I mean, I think that stuff can be helpful. And there's plenty of like biohacks that you can figure out. You can do intermittent fasting. You can fire up, ketogenesis. I mean, all these things, right, that are there. We seem to do better with less food in us, and processing smaller amounts of food, and generally foods that have high protein, right? Like a high protein, low carb, high fat, those types of diets seem to be the healthiest.
You've been hitting the gym, right, Rob? Every morning, right?
I've been going back, man. I went yesterday morning. Today I was going to go in the afternoon, but I got sucked into something I had to do for my mother and one of her internet purchases. So we had to do the show. So tomorrow morning I'm back bright and early.
It's having a positive effect. Your aura is healthier, in my view.
I mean, I need it. I love going to the gym, and I love moving the energy, because when I do it, I just feel infinitely better, like I'm in my body.
Yeah.
And when you get to a certain age, right, it's like, this thing's been around for a while. So you got to, kind of renew your relationship with it over a period of time. This is a good quote here. If you don't get your electrolytes, you get wicked cramps. That's true. You got to keep your electrolytes and salts up in general. Yep, absolutely. Look at this. Look at Seegard. I did the 33-day water only fast last year. Amazing stuff. That's a fucking hack right there. He's a Pisces, though. He can handle it. This is Kelly and the kids. Nearly stopped eating and started feeling 100 times better. It's true. We don't need all this food.
Mm-hmm.
We got suckered into the fucking golden buffet and the Happy Meal and, the 3-course meal and
that absurd food pyramid.
The food pyramid. We got suckered into all that stuff.
Yeah.
We don't need it all. Yeah, I agree with Kelly.
So speaking of Las Vegas, one thing we got to talk about is this Mark Cuban selling. It's just so funny. When you told me about this, I'm just like, this is just so perfectly reflective of where things are going, where things are, and just the fact that, I'll let you take the floor because you know the story better than I do. But basically, the Adelson clan has bought the majority of the Dallas Mavericks for Mark Cuban, and they plan on making it a Las Vegas style gambling resort.
Right. Let's take a look at Mark Cuban's chart.
Yeah.
Let's see if we got a rising sign on him.
Yeah. Mr. Shark Tank himself.
He's a fucking turtle on the fence post.
What does that mean?
Means that, so that comes from Russ Winter's world. And Russ and I talk about this. And it's kind of like people that arrive at positions and you scratch your head and you're like, how the fuck did they get there?
Okay, I got to ask you a question. Is Mark Cuban, is that his real name?
What's that?
Is that his real name?
No, of course it's not.
Wow.
No.
What is his real name?
It's something very, very Jewish.
Okay,
Hold
that
on.
makes sense.
Let me see. I have his chart, but I want what's his? It's here we go. And for a long time, Mark Cuban was one of these guys that entrepreneurs loved, and people
Right.
that were really into this whole idea of the American way and capitalism because they saw him do it, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, did they take his real name off?
That is so funny.
They took his real name off. Let's see. His father, Norton Cuban, was an automobile upholsterer. Cuban described his mother, Shirley Nee Feldman, as someone with a different job or different career goal every other week. Cuban is Jewish, grew up in Mount Lebanon, a suburb of Pittsburgh, in a Jewish working class family. Okay, here we go. So his paternal grandfather's name was Chabinsky, right? Actually, Chabinsky, and he changed Chabinsky to Cuban after he came from Russia to Ellis Island. And his maternal grandparents were Romanian Jewish immigrants, according to Mark's brother Brian, though Mark claimed their maternal grandmother was from Lithuania.
Why would you do that, Mark Chabinsky? Why would you change your name like that?
Well, it was his great grandfather who did it, and it's like somebody at Ellis Island said that name's too long.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what should I change it to? Ever been to Cuba?
If I know.
But I'd like to go. Well, how about Cuban? Cuban it is. Maybe that.
Okay, so it was his ancestors that did that. Okay. I didn't know if it was like a John Leibowitz situation where he changed his name to John Stewart.
No, this is two generations.
Okay, so it wasn't Mark. Right. Okay, that's okay. Whatever. He had no control over that.
All right, here's Cubans on the fence post moment. Turtle on the fence post. He went to IU, Indiana University, which is where Michael Penix came from, and he was a huge Hoosier Bobby Knight guy, right? He loved the Hoosiers, and he left, I think, with a business degree, and he went to Dallas to work for or learn from Ross Perot. That's the story. And there was a company called something Microsystems. Let's see. He says in 82, Cuban moved to Dallas, Texas, where he first found a job as a bartender for a Greenville Avenue bar called Elon. Then as a salesperson for Your Business Software, one of the earliest PC software retailers in Dallas. He was fired less than a year later after meeting with a client to procure new business instead of opening the store. Cuban co-founded Micro Solutions, that's what it was, with help from previous customers from Your Business Software. Micro Solutions was initially a system integrator and software reseller. The company was an early proponent of technology such as Carbon Copy, Lotus Notes, and CompuServe. One of the company's largest clients was Perot Systems. The company grew to more than $30 million in revenue, and in 1990, Cuban sold Micro Solutions to CompuServe, then a subsidiary of H&R Block, for $6 million. He made approximately $2 million after taxes on the deal. That's not a lot of money, even if it's like 1990 money. $2 million is a lot of money. So here's where the Cuban story gets interesting. He and his buddies decided that they wanted to listen to Hoosier basketball games. So they created I guess nowadays they call it an app. It was still an app back then, but they created a software that allowed them to stream the broadcast of the Indiana Hoosier basketball game over the internet so that their friends could listen to it. And that is the beginning of what's called broadcast.com. So broadcast.com immediately starts selling or streaming all of these sports events, right? This is back in the early days of the internet, where media rights for the internet had not been negotiated. So they're streaming Yankee games, everything. And that was a period of time when Yahoo was looking to build its company, right? Yahoo's looking around and saying, how can we get bigger? They bought broadcast.com for $5.7 billion in Yahoo stock. So after the sale of broadcast.com, Cuban hedged against the risk of a decline in the value of Yahoo shares he received in the deal. So he hedged that on the market because he knew that Yahoo was likely going to go down, which it did. So he made money going both ways. Now, what happened is that Yahoo lost all the rights to all those games because MLB said, wait a minute, we're going to negotiate those rights. NFL said, wait a minute, we're going to negotiate those rights. The NCAA said, wait a minute, we're going to negotiate those rights. At the end of the day, Yahoo was left with nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, nothing. They may have had some, nascent technology that they could have hired a few people from Silicon Valley to develop at way less money. So Mark Cuban and his buddies received $5.7 billion in stock from Yahoo. And then he leverages that stock, right? He hedges it so that if it goes down, he's making money again, which he did. That's the turtle on the fence post. He basically acquires the Dallas Mavericks from that almost phantom deal with Yahoo. That's how he gets rich.
Wow.
He doesn't buy it with $2 million from the sale of microsystems, right? That doesn't work. So that's your turtle on the fence post guy.
Wow. So
and
what is your opinion?
He started Magnolia, I think, Magnolia Pictures as well. Magnolia Entertainment, which is not bad. It's an okay company. But he's more of a myth than anything else in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. But I got to ask you, what is your opinion on this move? Because it's so hilarious in my view, because here's Mark Cuban. Publicly, he's a big time Democrat, right? But he just got bought out essentially by the family who financed Donald Trump.
Well, he's a hypocrite.
Right. Well, there you go. What I just said right there is perfectly reflective of your turtle fence post phrase, right?
Yeah.
Because he's outwardly a Democrat, but he's getting money from Republican donors, right?
Yeah. So he's a Leo. He's got here. Let's bring his chart up here.
Mm-hmm.
See if I can do it. Can I get a? Oh, hold on.
So when I heard about this move, I'm thinking this is so cheesy. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it is cheesy because he thinks that he's still going to be able to run the team.
Yeah. But it's just like cheesy to sell out your franchise that he clearly likes going to the games. He likes being who he is right there at center court, being kind of obnoxious, but also kind of a player's owner in a sense. Like nobody really seems to dislike him too much. He is kind of an advocate for the guys he has on the team. He seems to like them. They seem to think he's okay. I like the guys on the Mavericks. I like Luka. I like Kyrie. They're a somewhat likable franchise. They're always competitive for the most part. But to sell out that team, that franchise, and to make it this fucking gambling resort where it's just what kind of crowd is that going to attract? You know what I mean? And
so Dallas, if you look at where Dallas is, it's not that far from the Oklahoma border. And the first thing you run into when you cross the border from Texas and Oklahoma is a huge fucking casino. Right. So if Texans wanted to get their gambling on, they don't have to go very far. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of special dispensation that they're able to get, or what kind of tribe that they can get to go in with them, because there isn't a lot of casinos in Texas. There's one, I think, in Eagle Pass, which is right on the Texas-Mexico border, but you don't find casinos in Texas. It's very rare. You don't find a lot of poker places in Texas. So it's going to be interesting to see, what kind of, tribal nation they bring in order to, kind of make this deal happen. and it's just, to me, it's just like the metastasization or the metastasizing of sports in general. Like we talked about it at the beginning with this super conference and getting rid of like the Pac-10, right? And that, to me, that's the NC2A metastasizing, right? And eventually it'll become some big fucking tumor and a huge cancer. That's what I think. And I think this could be the same way. And you have, this is really weird, because a long time ago, or not that long ago, if you were involved in pro sports at any level, we've had this conversation before in this show, there was no fucking way you were going to be remotely close to gambling, right? Like Alex Karras and Paul Hornan, who played in the NFL, had to sit out a season because they had some interesting ties to bookies. We talked about how Joe Namath had to sell his bar and grill nightclub because mafia guys used to hang out there. Like there was a time, Pete Rose, for crying out loud, right? I doubt he'll sniff the Hall of Fame while he's living, because he bet on games when he was a manager. And now all of a sudden, everything's okay. Now all of a sudden you can have a part owner of a team, and that team will play in the center of a gambling complex,
right,
at a resort.
Yeah.
Like that's where we were. This is where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
And, once you take the lid off of it, it's like, where does it end?
Right. Well, it could end very badly. I mean, I think you mentioned, you sent me a couple weeks ago an example of the New Jersey Nets, or no, I'm sorry, the Brooklyn Nets. They're playing the Bucks. The Bucks are the favorite. But what did the Nets do? They pulled like half their team or something crazy. What the fuck was that?
They pulled their starters.
Yeah.
And they weren't even out of the game.
Right. Did they do that at halftime?
You're betting on that game.
Yeah.
You're like going down to the Barclays Center with a fucking handgun, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at here. I don't know who coaches the Nets now, but it's like, where does he live? I'm going to track this motherfucker down, right?
So do you think eventually something that will happen, like where,
or like
absolutely. A couple of weeks ago, the Lions call, when the Lions were basically beat the Cowboys, and then they called back when they made that pass. Do you see that egregiously bad call?
Terrible.
Right. So
Terrible.
What you're saying basically is, with the proliferation of gambling and sports being inseparable from gambling at this point, just
and Jerry Jones is one of the owners of FanDuel.
And that's obnoxious. That's insane, right? So are you saying that eventually we'll see some sort of psychotic incident where somebody loses a lot of money and they're going to go down?
How could it not happen?
Okay.
Right? Because gambling is, it goes into a part of the brain that is addictive, whether it's smack or porn or gambling, right? It gets into that part of the brain, and some people have addictive tendencies. A lot of times you can see it in the chart, and then, then what? They lose everything.
Right.
And then, that's like, well, fuck it. I got nothing else left to live for. It's kind of like that movie Buffalo 66. Did you ever see that? With Vincent, what's his name? And it's the story about Scott Norwood, who missed the field goal in the Super Bowl. And Vincent, I always forget his last name. This character in this movie has a score to settle with him because he had money on the game.
Yeah. Right.
And that's exactly what that movie's about. And eventually he meets him in a bar and everything, and they kind of have this moment. Mark Cuban, by the way.
Have you seen Celtic Pride? Have you seen that movie?
No. Who's in that?
Oh my God. Okay, so it's like this movie about these Celtic fans. They kidnap a guy on the Jazz, and they end up becoming friends with him. They kidnap him because they're gambling, and they decide to bet on him because they like him. But that's a good movie. It's a good sports movie. It's a good sports gambling movie. It's funny.
Is there such a thing as a good sports gambling movie?
Yeah, I guess Celtic Pride is it. Celtic Pride's good.
Yeah, Cuban was born on a full moon. He's got an Aquarian moon in his chart, and he has a Sun Uranus or Sun Pluto conjunction in Leo. So making deals like this, it's not uncommon, with somebody, and especially like Moon in Aquarius. I mean, you can kind of see like the tech stuff with the Moon in Aquarius. And he has Mars in Taurus, and he has Neptune.
Do you mind pulling it up so people can see?
I got to do a bit of a screenshot. Hold on.
Okay,
I don't
that's
have
fine.
his rising sign,
Yeah.
so we're just going to go off of this.
Then after we talk about Cuban, I got something I got to mention about.
He's got a Neptune Mars opposition.
Okay.
In his chart, and I think at some point he could be taken to the cleaners. That's what I think. All right, here we go. Let me put it up here. All right.
Mr. Shark Tank himself.
Okay, where are we? All right, we're here. Let's do this. All right, so again, no time for the rising sign, but there's that Sun Pluto conjunction. That is not an insignificant aspect in a chart. That's actually quite powerful, right? Sun Pluto people, especially in Leo, they have to fucking win, right? Everything is, all or nothing with somebody as a Sun Pluto conjunction. And he's got Mars and Taurus, which again is engaged. Mars is activity, Taurus is the acquisition of resources. So he's going to be engaged, but he's got this Neptune opposition with Mars. To me, that's kind of like the Yahoo deal, right? It's like, it's just so fucking weird, right? And it's Scorpio and other people's money. And there was nothing there. There was no product. There were no rights. There were no contracts. It was all based on projection. And so, yeah, well, we've had some discussions with MLB and, they really like the technology, whatever, right? I mean, to me, that's like the Neptune Mars opposition. And he was able to, and in that case, it worked in his favor. He was literally able to, and again, Yahoo needed a property. I was in Silicon Valley just shortly after that time. Like, I remember listening to broadcast.com on the internet.
Wow.
And dial up, right? And when you had a company like any company, like the way the game worked is that you got this investment money, right? And that investment money had a lot of strings attached to it. In many cases, you had to spend it in 1 year. 1 year. Like, you couldn't keep your investment money and sit on it and build your business. It didn't work that way. So for some companies, if they had a decent product, and a lot of companies didn't, they could go after, secondary, tertiary rounds of funding, and they could extend that window out, right? 2 years, 3 years, depending on the funding that they got. So what a lot of companies would do is they would get this money, and their products were really green, and the internet was really green. And, we're just starting to move into fucking cable modems, right? And coming off of, Earthlink. So the technology wasn't quite ready yet. So you had all these, some were baked, some were half baked, some were quarter baked. But the company that I worked for understood all this. So they looked around and they said, well, what can we do to make sure that this money's getting used and at the end of the year doesn't get taken away from us? Oh, we'll buy rollingstone.com, which is what they did, right? So they bought rollingstone.com, totally shitty deal. Jan Wenner was still in control of everything, but they just got to add that to their stock portfolio and then try to migrate people from rollingstone.com over to the website so they could buy MP3s. It was an MP3 company. That's how the internet game worked. You looked around, what companies can we buy? And I think Yahoo was in that space, right? Yahoo was looking around going, okay, we got to grow. We got to expand this thing. What's a property we can get? Oh, what about this broadcast.com deal? That's what happened. So, funny money. There was a lot of funny money. And you can see it with this Neptune opposition with Mars. And Mark Cuban, it's interesting too, because you throw that Sun-Pluto conjunction in there. He's willing to do things for money. Like, and I know he's got a lot of Libra energy in his chart, which I think probably makes him likable with this place. I'm sorry, that's Sun Uranus. That's Pluto over there. My bad. It's still in the range of the outer planets. And with Mercury Pluto, he still hates to fucking lose, right? He still hates to lose. So the Sun Uranus conjunction is very sudden, and that is like the deal with Yahoo, and this is like the deal with Yahoo. But he's kind of cutthroat, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this relationship with Adelson and Adelson's wife, because they've got huge resources, right? Huge, and who knows who's in her camp.
Mm-hmm.
Like now, he's really in the Shark Tank. Mark Cuban is in the Shark
Tank. That's funny. The Adelson clan got rich by essentially building Las Vegas in a way through casinos. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. In Vegas, as you've stated, I think at one point is built on despair and loserdom for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, Vegas is a really sad city in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. It used to be better when the mob ran it.
I could buy that.
And then the state of Nevada took over, which is just a bigger mob.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that's interesting there's that, right? Like he's got this thing going on with Adelson. I think he has 20% of the team still. Isn't that right? 20%.
Okay.
So he thinks he can still run the team. Like he's going to get all this income and all this money and still get to play God of the Mavericks. Well, how long do you think that's going to last?
Right. He's gonna get ousted, and eventually he's going to get ousted, or he play the mascot owner.
I would agree. I think he'll get ousted.
Interesting.
So he's been getting into this Twitter feud with Elon Musk. Have you seen this?
I haven't. No.
So Mark Cuban, he's one of these guys that likes to dance around, right? Like he likes to portray himself as, an entrepreneur and a capitalist and, free market, whatever. But he's like, stumping for diversity on Twitter.
DEI, they call it, right? Diversity.
Right, DEI. So he's stuck. And so he and Elon Musk got into it.
Okay.
And Elon Musk said, I find it interesting that you are so supposedly invested in diversity, and yet your teams historically have been more white than any other team in the NBA.
That's a funny fucking line.
It's true. The Mavericks have been more white than any team in the NBA, with maybe the exception of the Celtics, although the Celtics have changed.
Well, the Celtics have been pretty black the last couple decades, but that's interesting about the Mavericks because there's a specific type of Maverick player, whether it's Luka Doncic or Dirk Nowitzki or Steve Nash. It's like, hey, I like what you're doing, Mark. I like it. Your players are very smart. I like that.
Right. And at the same time, what Elon Musk is pointing out is that he's a fucking hypocrite.
Right. He is. That's true.
Like, and Greg Popovich is the same way. When Greg Popovich was, beating the drum for Black Lives Matter and, and scolding white people, right? He was scolding white people. You don't know how good you have this, going on and on and on. Right. I looked at his coaching staff. He had one black guy on his coaching staff.
Right.
Ime Udoka. That was it. That was it. He had an Italian dude. He had what's her name? I was spaced out her name. He had I think her name is Dawn something.
Huh.
And she had a woman on his coaching staff who apparently had an affair with Tony Parker, by the way.
Huh.
And Dawn, is it Dawn Staley? No, it's not Dawn Staley. I forget her name. Anyway, his coaching staff did not reflect his belief system. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah. Normally people who are posturing to that degree are just almost always completely full of shit. You know what I mean? It's normally pretty funny.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And the thing about Popovich, which we talked about maybe 2 or 3 shows ago, is that he's the owner, he's the general manager, and he's the president of the team.
He's created a fiefdom.
He has created a fucking fiefdom in San Antonio.
Yeah. That's a dictatorship without question.
It's a total dictatorship.
Yeah. That's fucking nuts. That's wild. He's got a little monarchy there. He's got his own fucking little empire that sucks at basketball right now, but I don't know what his plan is. It doesn't seem like he's letting loose the reins of control anytime soon on that franchise.
No, I don't think so. I've
He's
frozen
like Darth Vader of that fucking place.
He's
been there
Darth
forever.
Vader. He's totally Darth Vader.
Okay, I want to bring up something that I thought was so funny, and I just did not know how I did not know about this, right? And it's just hilarious. The president of the NC2A is former Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker. How long have you known about that?
Hold on a second. I'm gonna have to duck out and come back in. All right.
Yeah, you're frozen. Okay.
Yeah, hold on.
But this is an interesting topic. We look forward to your return.
Okay, we got to cover Draymond tonight, though. We got to cover Draymond.
Yep.
All right, hold on.
All right. So Rob is going to reboot here. He will be back momentarily right here on Sirius Sports. I want to check in with the chat and say what's up to everybody because this is so interesting. The fact that Charlie Baker, former governor of Massachusetts, is the head of the NCAA. We'll get more into it when Rob's back, but it's just very reflective of the times that we're living in. There's a few points I want to bring up about this because typically, if you're the governor of Massachusetts, that puts you on the fast track to the presidency, or at least you'll probably end up being a presidential candidate, right? We've seen this with Mitt Romney. Elizabeth Warren, she wasn't the governor of Massachusetts, but she was a senator from Massachusetts. She was effectively fast-tracked to be a presidential candidate at one point. So it's sort of a stepping stone. Okay, Rob is back, I believe.
Yeah.
Rob is back in the house.
I'm here.
So Rob, I was just saying how, Charlie Baker, he's the head of the NC2A. He's the president of the NC2A. And I was saying how prior to that, he was governor of Massachusetts, which is typically a stepping stone sort of job where you're on a fast track to potentially be president. We've seen this with sort of Mitt Romney. He was a major presidential candidate for a while prior to being governor. After being governor of Massachusetts. Elizabeth Warren, she was a senator from Massachusetts, sort of fast tracked for a time period to be a potential presidential candidate. So it's interesting how Charlie Baker, former governor of Massachusetts, it's almost like people told him, whoever the controlling establishment is, they said, "Hey, buddy, we're not sure if you're quite ready for the presidency yet. We got something pretty close. We're going to make you president of the NCAA." Pretty substantial position, but it's just interesting to make that transition from Massachusetts governor to president of the NC2A. What do you think about that?
I'm kind of looking at his Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
Seems like he might be a Boston Brahmin.
Yeah, he would fit that mold very well.
So let me just go through this.
The guy's about 6'8" too.
He was born in Elmira, New York, so he's not originally from Massachusetts. His family has been in what is now northeastern United States since the colonial era. He's the fourth generation in the family to bear the forename Charles. His great-grandfather, Charles D. Baker, was an assistant United States attorney in New York who served several years in the New York State Assembly. His grandfather, Charles D. Baker, was a prominent politician in Newbury, Massachusetts. His father, Charles Dwayne Baker, a Harvard graduate, was a buyer for the Westinghouse Electric Corporation. That's military-industrial complex. His mother, Alice Elizabeth Betty Nee Gormley, remained at home. His mother, Baker's father was a conservative Republican and mother a liberal Democrat. Funny how that works. The family was often drawn into political arguments at the dinner table. In 1965, his father became vice president of Harbridge House, a Boston management consulting firm. Baker grew up with two younger brothers, Jonathan and Alex, in Needham, Massachusetts. Before moving to Rockport, he grew up playing football, hockey, and baseball. He's described his childhood as pretty all-American. In 1969, they moved to Washington, D.C., where the elder Baker was named Deputy Undersecretary to U.S. Department of Transportation in the Nixon administration, becoming the department's assistant secretary for policy and international affairs the next year. This guy, it's in the genes, man, right? He served on the student council, played basketball, and joined DeMolay International. So DeMolay International is the youth program for Freemasons in a Bay State Conference championship basketball game. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's a Mason. Let's see. He was connected to some libertarian think tanks in Boston. I mean, this guy has fucking politics. He's kind of like, in some ways, a AAA version of the Kennedys. That's what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Going back into like grandfather or great grandfather. I don't know. I mean, let's see. Here we go. He went up against Jill Stein for governor of Massachusetts. So he ran as a social liberal in favor of gay marriage and abortion rights, and a fiscal conservative, stressing job creation as his primary focus. Right? That's like the secret sauce, right? Like, oh, I'm all for free markets, and I'm all for lower taxes, but I'm also for gay marriage and abortion rights. So
it's all uniparty shit. You know what I mean? It's just like
stuff. Yeah.
A slightly different angle on the same uniparty, it seems like. You know what I mean? All fundamentally the same on the core program.
You know who he kind of reminds me of in some ways? He kind of reminds me of Roger Goodell.
Dude, I was going to say that because they're in a similar position.
Roger Goodell's father was a senator from New York, right?
Wow.
So he comes out of that sort of political DNA gene pool.
Mm-hmm.
He's considered a liberal model Republican, frequent critic of Donald Trump. He supported the impeachment inquiry. Like, if this guy wanted to run as kind of a left center centrist, he might have the ability to do that. But if he was going to do it, if I was his astrologer, he should have done it this year.
Mm-hmm.
Because 4 years from now, and I don't think we're going to have any more elections after 2024, but that's just me. But this year is the year of the dragon, which he's a monkey, so it's usually pretty good for monkeys in the year of the dragon. And then the next year, so 8 years from now, will be the year of the monkey, which would be his sign. But he's 4 years older than me, so he's 67. That would make him 71. It's not impossible. He can make a run for the presidency if we still have this thing called the election, and we still have this thing called the United States. So maybe you're right. Maybe you're looking at this as a stepping stone in some ways.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny, just like, to go to that presidential seat. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, I don't know. It's sort of like the minor
He's
league.
into wind power. He loves wind power.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting? I think it was Henry Kissinger who had a quote about, academia is like basically politics for the most part, where it's like, if you want to learn politics, go into academia because that's just as cutthroat as
right. He's this guy, Charlie Baker, is a climate change wonk. He's perfect. He's perfect. He's a green Republican.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a question here. Will Astro Chads return? What's the status of Astro Chads?
Astro Chads is likely to return in Aries. Season 2 is coming soon. Not now, but probably in Aries. We'll start season 2. Start out with some flames. We're probably going to be going over the planets because we went over the basic 12 signs, and then now it's time to go into the planets, and then eventually the houses, and just have a lot of fun along the way. So that's pretty much the plan with Astro Chads. Yeah, it's going to return.
I think Longo's quietly working on his plan for world domination right now.
He's working on something, and he's traveling, and he's working on something. That's all I know for sure. He's an artist. I don't try to keep up with his daily routine, right? But he's definitely doing something. And yes. I don't know what it is, but it's something.
Yeah.
So,
let's talk about Draymond Green.
Draymond Green, you piece of trash. You scumbag, you out of control, impulsive, just junkyard dog. I'm going to make a prediction right now, and I've made a similar prediction in the past. It might not be in the NBA. It might not be today. It might not be tomorrow. But Draymond Green is going to say the wrong thing to the wrong person. I don't care if you're 6'7", 6'8", whatever the case may be. The law of the universe tells me that eventually your intimidation bully tactics don't add up to a successful outcome. And you've been getting away with this behavior for too long. And eventually you're going to say the wrong thing to the wrong person. That's what I think about
that happened to him already.
Really?
Do you know the story about him and Tristan Thompson?
I don't.
So apparently he was at a club and LeBron was there and Tristan Thompson was there. And Draymond was hitting on this woman that Tristan Thompson was with. And Tristan Thompson didn't like it. Right. And so they started beefing inside the club. And Tristan Thompson said, let's take this outside. And Tristan Thompson apparently knocked him out. Now, if you look at Tristan Thompson, he's fucking huge.
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's 6'11", probably weighs about 270 pounds.
Yeah.
Dre, if he's lucky, is 6'5".
Okay.
It probably weighs about 230.
Yeah, Tristan's huge. This is a
Tristan
man
Thompson he's got at least 7 to 8 inches of reach on Draymond Green.
Yep.
You know, Tristan Thompson is the one player the Kardashians could not break, by the way.
How do you figure?
Because he's still in the league. All those other guys got washed out, like Rashad McCants. You know, his claim to fame now, he hangs around with Gil Arenas on his podcast, right?
Yep.
Like he was out of the NBA in, I think, 4 or 5 seasons. And he was a pretty good college player. And I think he made all rookie team. But, you know, what's his name? Nick Young. Nick Young got chewed up and spit out by the Kardashians. Lamar Odom nearly fucking died. Right?
Yeah. Did I tell you that I didn't meet Lamar Odom, but I would see him at bars? Did I tell you about that?
He'd be kind of unmistakable. Hard to miss.
Yeah, right. But okay, so when he was going through all that crack stuff with the Kardashians and he was in and out of the NBA, he actually ended up returning to the University of Rhode Island for a time period. It's not untypical of professional athletes to return to their alma mater, work out, you know, get their head right. It happens. So he was at the University of Rhode Island, and I would see him out like every bar night. I would look up and it would be Lamar Odom, and people would get pictures with him, and I wasn't into it because like, yo, this guy's like, he's got a fucking crack problem, man. His
personality apparently is that he's a very sweet guy.
I bet he's a super nice guy, but it's like, it was just weird to see, you know, you're out with your buddies and your friends or whatever. And so it's like, oh, there's Lamar Odom and he's in the fucking tabloids all the time because he's going through a tough time. And it's, you know,
Lamar's a Scorpio, and he had that near-death experience at the brothel, right, in Nevada. Steger has a really funny. Do you see this? He's talking about Tristan Thompson. He must have used tantric techniques and not had any of his essence subsumed by the demon Armenian Wumas.
Well, you bring up something interesting because there does seem to be an energetic connection between some of these guys going in there and just having their they get
sucked dry.
Yeah,
right.
Look
at what's happening with Travis Kelce and the fucking Chiefs, right?
Mm-hmm.
The lady in red is sucking him dry,
and that's robbing him of his energy and his spark on the field.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let's talk Draymond Green. Let's talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
So you probably didn't listen to his press conference today, did you?
Nope.
All right. I got into it with people on this one chat forum. And my position or piece was, shut the fuck up.
So, okay. Is he trying to use his therapy as sort of this PR, guys, I went to therapy, I'm cool now? Is that what he's doing? What is he doing?
So the blather that came out of his mouth was embarrassing. Okay. It was embarrassing. And you know, he's calling Adam Silver Adam, right? Not Commissioner Silver, Adam. Like they're buddy. Like they're on a first name basis. And he really understands that he's not going to punish a player. He's going to try to help him. Because Draymond Green said, it's all too much for me. I think I'm going to retire. That's what he said to him, right? If I was Adam Silver, I'd say, okay, Katie in payroll will get in touch with you and she'll draw up your retirement papers. Like, that's what I would have said.
Yeah.
And I would have fucking sent the retirement papers to Draymond Green.
So,
right,
he's not just a thug, right? He seems to have a deceptive, manipulative part of him.
He's a Pisces. Draymond Green is a Pisces. And he has this amazing ability to play the role simultaneously of a bully and a victim.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how he's sort of worked this thing out, right? And Adam Silver, Commissioner Nosferatu, said, I'm not going to let you do that. Well, why not? Let him fucking do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's actually ruining the fucking quality of your game. I'm not going to let you do that. And so Draymond got a hug. He got a hug from Commissioner Silver. And then he got a hug from Steve Kerr. They talked it out and they both cried together. And I'm like, oh.
Did he really say that?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
That's brutal. That is so brutal.
He said this, right?
Oh.
And then I'm listening to this press conference.
Yeah.
And he says, it's never been about me. I've never been a me guy. Look, you got to be fucking kidding me. It's always about you. Right? Like, this is how out of touch he is. So 3 weeks of therapy. Apparently, he was seen playing domino games. And then he was at LeBron's birthday party. So it's a lot of hard therapy there. So my piece was, like, just shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You come back. You don't say anything, because if you're really going through a process, like if you're really in some form of deep self-exploration and reflection, and you're really trying to understand why these things keep happening in your life, the worst thing you could do at that point in time is to fucking talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst thing you can do. Like, shut up, go play basketball, and show people by example that you're serious about what you're doing. So I got pushback from that. Right?
Oh, wow. From Warriors Nation.
Well, yeah. It's like, well, some people, you have to do it or else the media will create the narrative. Bullshit. Andrew Wiggins spent 3 months away from the team last year. And the media was all over what was going on with Andrew Wiggins. Right?
What, during the offseason? Or what happened there?
During the season, Andrew Wiggins left the team. Andrew's another Pisces, by the way.
Okay.
Right? Another Pisces. And Andrew Wiggins had a major crisis last year. Number one, Draymond Green punched Jordan Poole, and Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins were tight. They were buddies. Yeah. And nothing happened to Draymond Green. Nothing, right? So your best friend gets clocked. By the way, Jordan Poole never brought it up. He never brought it up.
Yeah. But here's
my question. That's a guy who talks, by the way. He's a Gemini. Jordan Poole, talks shit. He never brought it up.
Yeah.
So then Andrew Wiggins,
he leaves the team for 3 months, though. Like, that is something that would never happen in the 90s. Ever.
Well, let me tell you, here's the rumor behind the story. The rumor behind the story is that he found out that his wife had given birth to their oldest child, a girl, and the real father was his best friend. So he finds this out during the season, and he's just incapable of focusing.
Wow.
So that was being talked about last year. And there were players from various sports who were like confirming this, right? And I think it even came up on Gil Arenas' podcast, if I'm not mistaken. Like, that was kind of out there.
Wow.
So in light of all that, Andrew Wiggins never felt compelled to have a press conference and talk about his shit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's like, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to talk about it. Jordan Poole, who is a talker, never had a press conference about what happened between him and Draymond Green. And yet people think that somehow he has to talk about it.
Well,
or else the media will control. That's bullshit.
Yeah, it is bullshit. And what it is, in my view, is PR. He did a PR press conference in order to re-enter the league. So I think he's trying to garner sympathy for his position, and it's manipulation.
He's totally manipulated. He's Draymond Green is a complete narcissistic sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he is. And people get attached to somebody because they were instrumental in the Warriors winning 4 championships. Well, to be honest with you, the last ring they won, he didn't play very much during the season. He was hurt a lot of that season. So he was somewhat responsible for the 4th ring, maybe more so for the other 3. But then you look at what he did against LeBron in 2016, and he got kicked out, right? He got kicked out of that series, and the Cavaliers win. So he could be responsible for them losing that series. And then he ran Kevin Durant out of town, right? He got in Kevin Durant's case. And Durant said, I had enough of this shit, right? I'm out of here. I don't need this guy. Yeah. So this is kind of who Draymond Green is. He's a very volatile character. So I have this theory about him and Steph Curry, who are psychically entwined. So Steph plays this, kind of Christ-like role, right? Like Andre Iguodala said, he's closer to Jesus than anybody else I've ever met. And when you look at Steph, another Pisces, you look at Steph's vibe, he's very calm, he's very low key. You can just tell that if you hung out with Steph Curry, he's probably a nice guy. That's what I think. Wow. He's probably a nice guy. Completely controlled by his wife, but a nice guy.
You know what's crazy? I got to bring this up real quick. His wife she was on some podcast or whatever, and she basically revealed the fact that he likes feet, which is very Pisces of him.
It's very Piscean.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. I think she's his handler, but that's another story. Anyway, so you have Steph Curry, who portrays all these attributes of sort of an enlightened person, like the bright side of Pisces. Draymond Green and Steph Curry are involved in a form of psychic entanglement. And so Draymond Green is a manifestation of Steph's shadow, right? And that's why he's around.
Wow.
Because Dre does all the things, right, that Steph can't do, right? He's volatile. He's violent. He's caustic, right? He's loud. And then for Draymond, Steph does all the things that Draymond can't do, right? He's reasonable. He's quiet. He's even-keeled. He has a higher sort of perspective. And Draymond Green's domestic life is weird. Like, anybody could have whatever kind of domestic life they want. But it's kind of weird. Like, you're not sure if he's married or not. You're not sure where the kids are coming from, right? Like, it's like kind of baby mama scenario. Steph Curry, not like that. Steph Curry's married, has 3 kids. He comes from a nuclear family. Dad played in the NBA. So Steph Curry is all the things that Draymond Green isn't in his own way. So the two of them have formed this symbiosis and this psychic entanglement, which is why this idea for Steph, if Draymond leaves, it's like a part of him psychically is leaving. So I think it's a very weird relationship. And when you look at Pisces, it's the 2 fishes, right? Wow. They're the 2 fishes.
Yeah.
One is swimming in one direction and the other swimming in the other direction. And as much as Steph has this kind of enlightened, almost Christ-like persona, Draymond Green's a devil. And you can see it astrologically, and you can see it almost from a Jungian perspective, where there's this entanglement and this projection going on with the 2 of them. Wow. That to me is the bigger story that nobody talks about.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about that.
Yeah.
They'll talk about
like this yin yang symbol wheel, like the 2 fishes just fucking.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what it's like. And they're entangled, but nobody talks about that. And it's because they have a limited vocabulary around sports. They're coming at it from, a three-dimensional kind of point of view, which we're not. We're looking at this from an almost mythopoetic, right? A mythopoetic sort of relationship.
Yeah. That's fucking funny, dude. One thing I want to mention real quick, just because it was huge and it happened this week, and it does relate to the world of sports and sports podcast. One of the very few sports podcasters I like that is a former professional athlete is surprisingly Shannon Sharp. He's fucking funny. He's actually pretty funny. And I wanted to ask you, did you happen to see the Shannon Sharp, Cat Williams interview?
I did see it. And so Shannon has grown on me.
He's grown on me too. I didn't like him when he was on ESPN. He was just
I could not stand watching him and Skip.
Yeah, it was awful. It was awful.
It's
he was definitely playing a role, playing like sort of a tap dancing sort of role. You know what I mean? He was just not.
But he would also like immediately, it's like, Shannon, you got to check the BLM box here.
Oh,
like
big
when
time,
BLM was happening, Shannon Sharp was insufferable.
Awful. But he's not that bad in real life. Like he's actually kind of funny when he's like.
Now he's very funny.
So funny.
He's very funny. When Cat Williams went on one of his rants, he went for a glass of cognac. So hold on a second. I need another one.
Yeah,
it was so fucking funny, right?
Yeah, and he plays like, well, Cat will be about to go on a rant, and he'll be like, "Oh no, don't do it, Cat," knowing Cat's gonna do it. Oh, you can't do that, Cat, knowing that he's gonna.
And he get that look. He's like, look over at the producer.
Yeah.
What do I do? What do I do? Right?
Yeah.
It's like, let it go. We'll deal with it, right? That interview. Cat was high as fuck too. He was so fucking high during that interview.
I feel like he's high all the time. He's the 20 blunt a day guy.
He's high. He was high as fuck.
Yeah.
And for me, I didn't know a lot of these people. Like I didn't know who Ricky Smiley was. I didn't know who Ricky Smiley was.
No clue.
So some of this stuff I'm like trying to backfill in my brain. Okay. Sequel to Fridays. I didn't see Fridays. So I know a little bit about it. I'm just backfilling it. Okay, so he's going to go off on this Ricky Smiley guy. The one thing I will say about Cat in that interview is that he claims in that interview none of what he said was to make himself better, and I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that somewhat because I think the way that he portrayed a lot of these guys, which is probably true, by the way, as a byproduct of that portrayal, he just comes out looking better.
Yeah,
right?
No, he portrayed himself as the king of black comedy in that interview.
Yeah.
That's what he did. But I think he's probably right in that because I find him entertaining. I find him, here's the thing with me. I'm not going to watch his stand-up, but I'd love to watch another interview like that. You know what I mean? Talking about
that interview was fire. He was really funny during that interview.
He was very, very entertaining. Very funny and entertaining. For sure.
Yeah,
I thought Shannon was funnier just because I find Shannon to be funnier, but I found
Shannon, this podcast has allowed him to be more of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, I find myself liking Shannon Sharp more.
Yeah.
Because he's genuine. Like you're seeing a genuine, more authentic side of Shannon.
Right. When 99% of these like athletes turn podcasters, we're seeing a lot of them are big time misses. In my view, but Shannon is becoming a hit, especially with this recent Cat interview, because what I loved about the Cat Williams interview, he's dishing the dirt. He's telling his real truth, his real life story. But I love the inside baseball on some of these media dynamics and him telling the truth about some of these other comics, like fucking Kevin Hart, for example. I've never okay, Kevin Hart, okay, you're kind of entertaining, whatever. You do some voices, you do some things. Never found it that interesting compared to like Cat, who's like the real deal Holyfield versus, somebody like, Kevin Hart or any of these other people.
Well, he went in on all the Kings of Comedy guys, right? The only guy that he had anything respectful to say about was Bernie Mac.
Bernie Mac, yeah. And Bernie Mac is funny. I didn't realize it, but he is.
Yeah.
So
his thing about Cedric the Entertainer was hilarious. The man can sing, the man can't dance, and the man can't tell a joke. How the hell could he be Cedric the Entertainer? Oh,
Yeah. He had some good lines. My personal favorite was when he goes, you know, I like to smoke weed. I like nicotine, and I always have a pistol on me. If you stop me 15 times, you're going to find that on me 15 times.
Right.
You know,
He's basically saying, this is who I am. This is who I am. Right.
Right.
I'm not apologizing for it.
Mhm.
No, that interview, like the amount of views on that interview is fucking off the charts, man. There's
35 million last time I checked.
Huge.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, and I know you don't really watch him and probably aren't that much of a fan of him, but Jason Whitlock has been at this now for the last 3 years on Fearless. And he's got his own version of this going on with Stephen A. Smith. And Stephen A. Smith it's like he's going after Stephen A. Smith in the sports realm, just like Cat Williams went after these comedians in the comedy realm. And how they're looking into Stephen A. Smith's past, and it doesn't add up. Right? It doesn't add up. Like his stories about playing for the New York Fashion Institute basketball team. Yeah. Like it's a fucking gay college with women. and they're not even sure they had a basketball team. Wow. And based on like one scrimmage against University of Salem, North Carolina, Clarence Big House Gaines supposedly gave him a scholarship because Stephen A. Smith couldn't miss. And so he went to Winston. That's the school that Earl Monroe went to. And supposedly he played there. Like none of this stuff is really sort of fleshing out, right? It's not really like he said that when he was at the University of Winston-Salem, that he averaged 1.5 points per game, but he only played one game because he blew out his knee. Like, how the fuck do you average 1.5 points per game if you only play one game?
Right. That's fucked up.
Right. And then this is what Jason said. He said that when how he got launched was because he was friends with Allen Iverson back in Philadelphia. Right. And Allen Iverson would give him some tidbits every now and then. And then Stephen A. would write a story about it. And according to Jason, anytime Stephen A. wrote something, the editors at the Philadelphia Inquirer had to almost completely rewrite it. Right. So it wasn't like he was a great writer. Yeah. So that gets back to this idea that there are these people that are like turtles on the fence post, which goes back to Mark Cuban to a certain degree. Right. And that deal with fucking Yahoo, which basically sets Mark Cuban up for life. You know, kind of a turtle on the fence post move. Stephen A. Smith, turtle on the fence post. The Kings of Comedy, Kevin Hart. All these people become these industry plants.
Yes.
And it's their role to basically support and maintain a particular narrative when it comes out, whatever it is.
Right.
Whether it's shots, whether it's climate, whether it's gender, right? That's their role. And they've been put into place basically to play those roles. And so we're looking at a wide cross-section of it. From sports to media, possibly sports. Like Mark Cuban just can't come right out and say, you know, I'm an American first guy. I'll hire the best people. I don't care who they are. He can't say that, right? He has to promote the program.
Yeah. It's like these guys are playing ball to maintain the party line when the real true players aren't given enough credit, but they have way more respect in the streets, it seems.
Karen McQuaid brings up a really good point. Yeah, like Epstein and his money. Epstein's a total turtle on the fence post. And he had he had the Mager group backing him up. So, yeah, this is what happens. Yeah. Like, you know, when people pop out of nowhere. I mean, as much as I like Vivek and, you know, how Vivek can lay waste to people, you know, he's another guy kind of pops out of nowhere. He's a Massachusetts guy, isn't he?
I don't think so. Vivek the Snake is somebody who has come out of nowhere, and he's somebody I've grown to really dislike because I think that in the era we're living in of data collection, people are going to hear what they want to hear because what you want to hear is known. through, the data collection that we voluntarily submit via social media. So I think Vivek the Snake is especially dangerous. And I think his moment is over. That's my prediction for him. I think he's sort of this fraudulent light that burned for a time period, but I think he's about to burn out.
Well, he's a very intelligent turtle on the fence post. I think he's smart, and I know that Shiva would take question. He would question that, but I think Vivek is actually smart. I think Shiva's smart too. Don't get me wrong.
I think Dr. Shiva is like a Ferrari, and Vivek the Snake is like a Taurus with 4 busted out tires, but he puts on this paint job that looks really shiny, but eventually you look into it and you're like, oh my God, this is not going to work. This guy. And I think Owen Benjamin also despises Vivek the Snake. And I think that it's over for him. It's not something that's visible now, but I think it's just over for that guy. I think he is a complete construct and he's on his way out.
What do you think of this comment by Cognitive Dissidents? Watch the video of Kevin Hart's collection, like 20 minutes. The guy didn't say anything funny. It was like he wasn't even a comedian. Do you think do you think Kevin Hart's funny?
No, I don't. And I don't think Joe Rogan is funny either. And Kat mentioned that. He's like, hey, not only is Joe not funny, but he's essentially pushing 5 or 6 comics that aren't even funny at all. Speaking of Dr.
Right.
Shiva real quick, when I told him, I was like, Joe Rogan's a comedian. He couldn't believe it. He's like, he's not a fucking comedian. He couldn't believe it because Joe's that not funny, because Joe has disconnected himself from truth. He got bought out for $200 million, and he used to not be a turtle on the fence post, but he became one, which is an especially sad plight, in my view.
Who, Joe Rogan?
Yeah.
His whole genesis.
What's that?
His whole genesis in becoming a podcaster and a really, really influential podcaster is fascinating on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that show? What was that show he did? What was it called?
Fear Factor.
You look at Fear Factor. Fear Factor is all MK Ultra programming.
Right.
Like that's like the shit that they do to people on that show is what they do in certain rituals in MK Ultra programming. Making them eat shit. That is disgusting.
That show was disgusting, wasn't it?
Right.
Looking back.
It was, burying people in a grave of roaches, right? In a casket of roaches. I mean, that's all MK Ultra shit.
It was like on par with MTV's Jackass, but even lower tier. You know what I mean? Because people would voluntarily make asses of themselves for these little prizes. And then, Joe would have his reactions. But the more I think about it, somebody like Joe, I mean, you mentioned those Matthew North documentaries in a previous broadcast. He could have been a construct from the very beginning, because his whole career, I do think he had a soul for a time period, but he's been sort of in the limelight for a very, very long time, Well,
it's interesting too that he had that role on what was it, talk radio or news radio, whatever that show was. Yeah. And he played kind of the goofy conspiracy guy on that show. Yeah. And it was like, oh, well, they're kind of typecasting him. Have you ever seen any of his videos of him doing Taekwondo when he was a kid in Massachusetts?
No, I didn't.
He actually was, he had a pretty fast, like, left foot. Like, he actually had some skills in that world. So, he tried to cross over, do the MMA thing, but he just couldn't do it. That world was just too brutal for him. But it allowed him to kind of get, the hot seat and, MC all these MMA fights. The guy must be worth just a shit ton of money.
Yeah, an absurd amount of money, but I do believe he sold his soul. I interacted with him a bit in 2015, as I've told you, but it's just, his show used to be at least somewhat interesting, and now I wouldn't watch any of it even for a second. I might see some clips mistakenly on some shows, but I just don't think that. I think that Joe is there's really no point criticizing him because he's at the point now that it'd be comparable to criticizing like a Conan O'Brien or like a Jay Leno. It's like they're not necessarily concerned because they've got such a locked in position within the pyramid, you know?
So Michael, who is a big martial arts guy and MMA guy, said his spinning back kick is very high level. I've watched videos of Rogan do the Taekwondo stuff and fight in tournaments. He was not somebody you wanted to tangle with at that level.
How tall do you think he is?
He's probably about 5'5", maybe 5'5", 5'6". He's not very big.
5'5" at the most. I think
Yeah.
there's rumors as little as 5'3". Is 5'3.5" would be my final guess. If I had to bet, if I could win $1,000 by guessing his exact height, I would go 5'3.5" with him with no shoes on. And he claims to be 5'8", which is a lot.
Michael says he's also a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I think Rogan's probably legit in that area. I think he's legit. That's
I don't
my
know.
sense.
I don't know. I think I don't know. I'd be okay fighting him, that's for sure.
I wouldn't. Again,
not that I want to, but I'd be totally fine with it. I wouldn't care.
I'm 63 years old, and those days are over for me.
Okay.
Matt Burns says that Rogan's 5'2".
Yeah, that could be entirely true. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Charlie asks, who's the greatest left-footed kicker of all time? I'm going to give you an answer, Charlie. That's probably not the right answer. I'm going with George Blanda.
Okay. I got a quick little thought for you because, you know, the whole Epstein list or whatever that is, it came out, right? And I'm thinking to myself, the Epstein list, wait until the Aubrey Marcus list comes out. You know what I mean? All those, you know, athletes and politicians and celebrities going in and out of there to his ayahuasca orgy ceremonies. Like, I think he's going to be the next Epstein list. What do you think about that?
The whole idea of having an orgy on ayahuasca sounds repellent to me. It just sounds freaky.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I think the Epstein thing that I think separates it out from any Aubrey Marcus connections is this mega group that he was a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all really high level Jewish European Zionist financiers, right? Ronald Lauder, Jean-Luc, what's his name? The fashion guy, Les
Black or something, Neon Black or something, or Louis something Black.
No, Louis Black's a comedian.
No, that's I don't know. I'm just throwing out names. Some name I thought I heard.
But these guys were also connected to Unit 8200, which is sort of the cream of the crop of the IDF's cyber forces, right? So everything with Epstein leads all the way back to Israel and leads it back to Project 8200. And one of the models who came forward and talked about her experience with these guys, and they all basically said, you're just a stupid white trash Christian girl, and you're like an ant compared to us, right? So there's this whole kind of like, you know, hardcore racial supremacy that these guys were also about in some ways, right? So when you put that up against the Aubrey Marcus connections, like there's intense, and then there's like really intense. And so all this stuff leads back to those guys. And what was really interesting is that you would eat Rogan, after you knocked him out.
Yeah,
Keith Woods. Okay, I got to bring this up, and then we should probably shut it down.
Okay,
but I got to bring this. Jean-Luc Brunel. Thank you, Mr. Gray. No more. Keith Woods was on a Twitter space
with Alex. Yeah,
with Alex, and Keith Woods. I love Keith Woods, by the way. He's so monotone, you know. He's so just monotone. Like nothing gets to this guy.
Yeah.
You know, his vocal pitch doesn't deviate very much at all, right? Like he's got a pulse. I know he does, but I like the fact that he's just so consistent and monotone. And he got Alex Jones on there and basically said, you know, what do you think of this? And he brought up all the mega group stuff, and he brought up the Project 8200 stuff, and he brought up the whole sort of Jewish supremacy stuff. And then, you know, Alex starts fucking eventually talking about how his great grandfather or his grandfather was a bomber pilot in World War II and saw droves of people in the camps. Like Alex can't even fucking stay with the conversation.
Yeah, Alex looked
Right.
like an absolute buffoon in that segment.
Did you hear what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
I did. Yeah.
It was kind of like Alex was, an archaic piece of ornamentary from another time,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like he was so not in that conversation
Right.
at that level.
Yeah, Alex is somebody who I don't think is as relevant as he used to be in any sense.
Not now. Not now. Not when people are fucking hitting the third rail,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're hitting the third rail again and again and again. And Alex, is always kind of, well, it's really not about them. I've got a more holistic approach. And
Right.
it's really about the whole globalist thing and what they want to do, and then the UN's involved. And it's like, Alex, fucking stay on topic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Stay on top. He can't do that. I'll tell you why. It's because Alex Jones is compromised. He's being extorted.
Mm-hmm.
And he's being extorted because he has unusual relationships with people who have unusual gender identifications. It's that whole Matthew North world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alex is he's a great performance artist, but not somebody I've listened to for quite some time.
Al, we've covered a lot of territory. You've got to get up and be a working man tomorrow.
Absolutely. Sirius Sports signing off. Great show, guys. Talk to you soon.
Hey, so please like the show. Help us kind of get up there in the algorithms. And if you Bobby Grich plated for the Rochester Red Wings. Oh, Charlie's pushing back on me now.
All right, guys, take care. I'm out. I'll talk to you guys soon.
See you, Al. See you. Charlie, I love it when you get feisty. All right, we're out of here. Thanks for being here. We'll be back. Well, I'll be back tomorrow for Astro Weather and 15 Minutes of Flame over on Boxcast. And I will have the link here in the show notes when we do Astro Weather tomorrow. And Thursday, my meeting got delayed with my web guy, but the new 15 Minutes of Flame site going to be up soon. Thanks, everybody. Take care, and bye for now.